Good morning. So today we're going to be starting the next packet. So that's going to be including lessons 5 through 8 and practice 5 through 8. We're continuing with our exponents unit. So what I'd like you to do is put your name and then also just write packet 2 on the bottom. I forgot to have that printed. So lessons 5 through 8 is packet 2. All right, so if we turn the page here, we're going to notice lesson 5 is what we're going to start with. So we're going to start with lesson 5. So I'd like you to take a second and do the do now and expand the following. So remember, expand means writing it out and stretching it out. So after you expand, you notice that x to the 5th would really just be x times x times x times x times x. There's an exponent of 5, which means we have to multiply that x 5 times. X to the 5th squared is really just saying take x to the 5th and multiply it by x to the 5th. Now, if you were to simplify that, x to the 5th times x to the 5th, here we're multiplying. So when we multiply our rules, we need to add our exponents. So it's really x to the 5 plus 5, or x to the 10th. Then x to the 5th to the 3rd power. What we need to do there is we need to multiply x to the 5th 3 times. And then if we simplify that, we're multiplying, so we need to add our exponents. So I'm going to add 5 plus 5 plus 5, and that gives me x to the 15th. Now the 4th one, x to the 5th to the 4th. So I need to expand that, so it becomes x to the 5th times x to the 5th times x to the 5th times x to the 5th. So we need to write that 4 times. Then if I simplify it, we're multiplying, so I need to add all my exponents. So it becomes x to the 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5, which gives me x to the 20th. Now I have x to the 5th to the 5th, so I need to multiply x to the 5th 5 times. And then if I were to simplify that, I'm multiplying, so I need to add all my exponents. So it becomes x to the 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5, which gives me x to the 25th. Then I have x to the 5th to the 6th power. So I need to expand that. So it's x to the 5th times 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 x to the 5th. And if I simplify, I need to add my exponents. So it becomes x to the 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus 5, or x to the 30th. So what do you notice is happening, and do you see any patterns? So what I want you to do is I want you to look at the exponents here and compare it to the exponents in the question. So in the simplified and then in the question. In the simplified expression and in the question. Simplified expression and in the question. Simplified and in the question. So is there anything that you know or notice at all about the 5 and the 2 and the 10? The 5 and the 3 and the 15? The 5 and the 4 and the 20? The 5 and the 25, and the 5, the 6, and the 30. So what I notice here is if you do 5 times 2, you get 10. If you do 5 times 3, you get 15. 5 times 4 gives you 20. 5 times 5 is 25, and 5 times 6 is 30. So if we multiply the powers, we get the simplified expression. So for both of these questions, it's kind of the same answer. It's when you multiply the powers. Sorry, I spelled that wrong. You get the power of the simplified expression. So then this brings us to our next rule, which is a power of a power, or power raised to another power. So in order to find the power of a power, we need to multiply our exponents. So we keep that base and we multiply the exponents. So I have a to the m, and then it's also raised to the n power. So I'm going to keep the a, then I'm going to multiply m times n. So let's look, for example, here. I have 5 raised to the 2nd, and that's all raised to the 3rd power. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep that base of 5, and I'm going to multiply 2 times 3, my 2 exponents. And that gives me 5 to the 6th power. Let's look at an example with a variable. Here I have k to the 5th, all raised to the 7th power. So I have a power raised to a power, so my rule is to multiply my exponents. So it becomes k to the 5 times 7, and that gives me k to the 35th. So now I want you to look at example 1. I have 4 to the 3rd raised to the 3rd power. I have a power raised to a power, so my rule is to keep that base of 4, and I'm going to multiply my exponents 3 times 3, and that gives me 4 to the 9th power. Then here, question number 2. I have x to the 6th raised to the 4th power. I have a power raised to a power. So when I have a power raised to a power, I need to keep that x and then multiply 6 times 4, and that gives me x to the 24th power. So I'd like you to take a second, pause this video, and try examples 3 and 4. So looking at example 3, we have 5 to the 5th raised to the 2nd power. I have a power of a power, so I need to multiply. So it becomes 5 to the 5 times 2, or 5 to the 10th. Number 4, I have z to the 7th, all raised to the 5th. So I have a power of a power, so I need to multiply. So it becomes z to the 7 times 5, or z to the 35th. So now I'd like you to take a minute, pause this video, and try 5 through 10 as well, and then come back to check your answers. So if you look, question 5 becomes 8 to the 4 times 3, or 8 to the 12. Question 6, once again, we have a power of a power, becomes w to the 9 times 4, or w to the 36. Question number 7 is a power to a power, so the rule is we multiply our exponents, so it becomes 2 to the 3 times 3, or 2 to the 9th. Number 8 is a to the 8 to the 5th power, so we need to multiply, so it becomes a to the 8 times 5, or 40th. Number 9, we have x to the 7th, all raised to the 3rd power. Power of a power, we need to multiply, so we get x to the 7 times 3, which gives us x to the 21st. And lastly, 9 to the 10th, all raised to the 5th, is 9 to the 10 times 5, or 9 to the 50th power. If you have any questions, please comment them on the video or in the Google Classroom, and please make sure to complete practice worksheet number 5 on the next page.